less than 48 hours away from the Philadelphia 76ers officially turning the basketball court, and expectations are fully building for this season. But one player has not gotten quite enough buzz yet, with him yet to take the floor with his new team, that being Trendon Watford. Well, I want to break down what is being said at Sixers training camp and why there is such a high level of optimism for what he can directly bring to this Sixers team. Let's dive right into things here, and do want to start off with this headline, this being written by Kai Carlin of Sixers Wire here, as he writes, multiple Sixers confident that Trendon Watford will fit right in once healthy. So to get into what is being said within the walls of the locker room here, that Kai writes, however, Watford is a bit behind the eight ball. He missed all of preseason as he has been dealing with a right hamstring issue, as the Sixers have had to move on without him. However, if one asks his teammates, they're not too worried about him when he does get healthy. Quote, he'll be all right, close friend Tyrese Maxey said of Watford. Sometimes things happen. You get hurt. But when he's back out there, he'll be able to contribute. We've got a lot of guys that have stepped up. I think Barlow has really stepped up, made his mark, and showed what he can do out there in the court. Bona as well. We've got some guys that can play that same little role position-wise. And to continue on a little deeper here, that Jabari Walker writes, quote, I've been around Trendon a good amount now, Walker said, quote, I've seen how he operates. He's just a hooper. He's a baller. So he's the last person you have to worry about. His feel for the game is just tremendous, so never have any doubt about him. The Sixers will open the season on Wednesday against the Boston Celtics on the road. Now, I've rode with the take for several months now that I think when push comes to shove, when this lineup is settled, when this roster is complete, that Trendon Watford is going to end up the starting power forward of this Sixers team. That does not seem to be something that is on the table for the opener due to that hamstring issue, and just based on the fact that this guy has now been out of the routine, now has not caught up to the ins and outs of the offense in the way that guys like Bono, like Barlow, like Walker have in this exact case. But I do not think we have to worry about this guy as a talent. Now, to speak of Trendon Watford a little bit directly here, he's coming off a season in which he played 20.8 minutes per game, averaged 10.2 points, 3.6 rebounds, 2.6 assists per game, shot 46.9% from the field overall, 33% from three. And while he's not a good three-point shooter yet, the fact that he is not a non-shooter, I do think is really encouraging and brings a little bit of lineup flexibility to this Sixers team. That Watford is a unique basketball player compared to what we're accustomed to seeing for the Sixers here. To describe his game a little bit, I would say think a little bit towards the best version of Ben Simmons, that he's not that gifted as a passer, but what he is a guy that is going to get a rebound on the defensive end, push the pace directly without needing to give it to a guard, and play make for others. That his handle is the real deal. And I was honestly surprised diving through this a little bit that NBA.com ranked the top 50 handle moments of the entire season last year, and Trendon Watford coming in with 46 with a pretty slick play that did pop on the timeline there. I think we're going to see some of that this year, of this guy being tasked with being a ball handler in the offense, playmaking for others, setting up his teammates here, and I think that's the entire shift that we're starting to see for this Sixers team, is there is going to be a lot more team basketball, a lot more off-ball motion, that these young guards are going to be flying around, and it's going to be a little bit more of guys like Trendon Watford and like Joel Embiid being willing to play make to them. And the other part of how this entirely works together, it does have to do with Joel directly. It was incredibly encouraging to me to see him suiting up for a preseason game. That was not something I thought was remotely on the table as far as a possibility, but nonetheless, there he was absolutely shredding a Minnesota Timberwolves really second and third team. But the fact that he was out there and looking skinny, I do not think we could ask for much more. The other thing that has become very clear to me, and I'm encouraged by this version of Joel Embiid that we did see in the preseason opener. Of course, we hope that he can aspire and achieve and reach levels that we're not seeing in just that game, nor can you in a preseason standalone matchup here. But one thing that continues to, run through my brain here, of when we're factoring on building out this Sixers team as a successful basketball team, there's going to be another guy that has to do the big man things. And what I mean by that is rebounding at a high level, blocking shots, being the anchor defensively. It has been true throughout the duration of Joel Embiid's career that regardless of the other four players around him, it is going to be an above average defense. I'm just not sure that is the truth anymore, that we can operate with certainty that is the case. Well, that brings in the question of how do you overcome that? Now, I'm a person that was a Nikola Jokic skeptic for quite a long bit of time. Hand up, got to wear the L on that one. He's the best player in the NBA, and I can acknowledge that here. But the reason that I was skeptical is because when you think of a guy like Nikola Jokic, that stylistically, the weaknesses in his game, primarily defense here, that's something that is really hard to overcome in a postseason setting. Joel Embiid still probably at this stage is a better defender than than Jokic there. But what he's not going to be capable to do at the level that at which he did at his peak is things like anchor the defense there, be the guy that can be the foundation of a high level defense, be a guy that can rebound at a high level. That even at Joel's best, he never has been this stellar rebounder with an instinct for pulling in boards. He's been a guy that is, because he's 7'2" and standing under the rim a lot, is going to find his way to double digit rebounds on a regular basis here. I think that the Sixers have to actively make sure that they have a guy that complements that. Now, the guy that has jumped to the surface here is Adem Bona, that we saw him start next to Joel in preseason, and that's a really encouraging idea to me, as he is such a dirty work guy, that he wants to dive on the floor, he wants to block shots, he wants to rebound at a high level, and his energy and work rate are off the charts. And we did get a little bit of a comment from Bona following that initial preseason game, is what he said is, quote, "I mean, it's a great experience to share the floor with him," Bona said at practice on Sunday. "It brings a different style of play to the team. Also, for me, I have to adapt to playing with him defensively and offensively. Try to space the floor because he operates on the top. So it's just great. I just want to see how we develop from there, and hopefully we can turn into something special." Bona won't be spacing the floor too much in the coming season. While he has been working on his three-point shot, the Sixers will be looking for him to just be in the dunker spot and give Embiid the space he needs to operate. The pairing produced some solid results, and the Sixers will certainly explore this pairing more as time moves on. Now, the other part that I think is worth factoring in to this Joel Embiid conversation is we've watched the evolution of him as a basketball player, that he has absolutely turned himself in one of the better shooters in the entire league, one of the most dominant mid-range shooters that I've frankly ever seen here. That it is, when he is absolutely cooking, when he is in that zone, he does not miss from that little 12-foot range that he loves getting to there. That face up near the elbow, take a quick dribble, pull up, and knock down. That's Joel Embiid. With that in mind here, if that is going to be the way that he ultimately wants to, be productive and find a way to score his points there, you're going to need somebody else to be willing to attack the glass, to generate offensive rebounds. And that is where guys like Trendon Watford and Adem Bona come in here. These are two guys that I think are very clearly going to play a huge role on this Sixers team, even if it does not show in the box score directly here. And right behind them, we are talking about a guy like Dominic Barlow, who I think there were not these lofty expectations for coming into the season, and he ultimately has outperformed every set of expectations in preseason. Jabari Walker, I think, is a bit of a similar conversation there, and it will be interesting to see. And to take a peek at this depth chart overall here for the Sixers, that you can see the power forward is going to be interesting. Paul George currently slotted in as the starting power forward, and I will note for George specifically that has been sort of a buzzword that he's been against for the entirety of his career. That when you ask him about playing the four, that has been something that he's been pretty vocally not in support of throughout the duration of his NBA tenure there. Different tune when he was asked about it at this specific media day. Now, I think more of that has to do with anything with just the evolution of the position. That you look around the rest of the NBA, there aren't really these Zach Randolph types or these Tim Duncan types that are going to be playing back to the basket, posting up, getting into their spots there. There aren't really these traditional power forwards in the way that there once was. The other part of that is, I think, is Paul George being being willing to do what the team needs here. Now, to look beyond that, we are talking about Trendon Watford, who we've discussed plenty in this, and I'm really intrigued about him from his skill set. Adem Bona, certainly in that same mix. Justin Edwards is strange to me that he is listed as a power forward, but I think there are lineups in which he will fill that role, and I think a little bit similar, or I would say more similar to the Paul George type role, as it is just kind of a scaled down wing to that point. And Janai Broom also in the mix here. This doesn't even include the two-way guys with obviously Barlow and Jabari Walker there. There are options at the power forward and the big man spot, and I think one of the other things that while we've spent so much attention spending time talking about these young guards, they kind of have quietly collected a group of young grinders at the power forwards position and big man position that are just going to compete for these. This level of competition, I think, is healthy for the Sixers organization, that it does feel like they are sort of readjusting expectations. And while I know we've been held to this second round standard for quite some long, that constantly the messaging has been wake me up when the playoff starts. We'll see if the Sixers can get past the second round this year. It's kind of nice that is not what we're walking into this season. The Sixers very clearly, to me, still have a chance to be a legitimate playoff contender, that they have a chance to win the Eastern Conference this year. I understand you have to squint and look at it this way, that they won, 24 games last year, 19 games last. I think Joel played 19, they won 24, if I'm off the top of my head correct. They have a lot to change. But everything that could go wrong did go wrong last year, and I refuse to believe that can be the case 2 seasons in a row. We'll see what ultimately shakes out here, but let's welcome entering the season with a little bit of no expectation, a willingness of let's just see what happens in front of us and adapt accordingly. There are reasons to get excited about the Sixers team, the young talent, the injection of life that has been brought into the organization, and each of these names hold a little bit of their their portion of why that excitement should exist. So we'll see what ultimately happens from here. But do not forget about Trendon Watford in the shuffle. And we are going to have to talk a little bit in depth about this quote unquote dirty work role of what I'm going to be calling the pairing with Joel Embiid. We'll see what ultimately happens on the floor this year, but I'm getting hyped up for this Sixers season. We are less than 48 hours away, and I cannot wait to see what this team looks like on the floor. We'd love to hear what you guys are thinking in the comments there. Drop those thoughts below. Give me your prediction for the season. Make sure you're smashing that subscribe button if you have not just yet. Dropping a like on this video here. I'll be back talking to you next time right here on Sixers Digest. Peace.